The thing is, I was one of those young firebrands who liked to drink, even though it got me into a few scrapes. Quite a few incidents, shall we say, of which I'm none too proud. But that's the cross you have to bear if you're a little over fond of the booze. It's rare to find a drinker with a clean conscience. Most of us will have considered knocking it on the head at one time or another, reforming our lives and perhaps turning to God or trying to make something of ourselves. But then noon comes around and you know what's good for that head is another drink. And so you head for the tavern. The taverns I'm referring to were in Bristol, on the southwest coast of dear old England, where we were accustomed to fierce winters and glorious summers. And that particular year, the year that I first met her, 1711, like I say, I was just 17 years old. And yes, I was drunk when it happened. In those days, you'd have to say I was drunk a lot of the time. Perhaps, well, let's not exaggerate, I don't want to give a bad account of myself, but perhaps half of the time. Maybe a bit more. Home was on the outskirts of a village called Hatherton, 7 miles outside Bristol, where we ran a small holding keeping sheep. Father's interests lay with the livestock, they always had, so having me on board had freed him from the aspect of the business he most despised, which was making the trips into town with the merchandise, haggling with merchants and traders, bargaining, cutting deals. As soon as I'd come of age, by which I mean as soon as I was enough of a man to meet the eye of our business associates and trade as an equal, well, that's what I did. And Father was all too glad to let me do it. My father's name was Bernard, my mother, Lynette. They hailed from Swansea but had found their way to the West Country when I was 10 years old. We still had the Welsh accent. I don't suppose I minded much that it marked us out as different. I was a sheep farmer, not one of the sheep. Father and Mother used to say I had the gift of the gab, and Mother in particular used to tell me I was a good-looking young man, and that I could charm the birds off the trees. And it's true, even though I do say so myself. I did have a certain way with the ladies. Let's put it this way, dealing with the wives of the merchants was a more successful hunting ground than having to barter with their husbands. How I spent my days would depend on the season. January to May, that was lambing season, our busiest time, when I'd find myself in the barns by sunup, sore head or not, needing to see whether any ewes had lambed during the night. If they had, then they were taken into one of the smaller barns and put into pens. Lambing jugs, we called them, where Father would take over while I was cleaning feeders, filling them up again, changing the hay and water, and Mother would be assiduously recording details of the new births in a journal. Me, I didn't have my letters then. I do now, of course. Caroline taught me them, along with much else that made me a man. But not back then, so that duty fell to Mother, whose own letters weren't much better, but enough to at least keep a record. They loved working together, Mother and Father. Even more reason why Father liked me going into town. He and my mother, it was as though they were joined at the hip. I'd never seen another two people so much in love, and who had so little need to make a display of the fact. It was plain to witness that they kept each other going. It was good for the soul to see. In the autumn, we'd bring the rams through to the pasture to graze with the ewes, so that they could get on with the business of producing more lambs for the following spring. Fields needed tending to, fences and walls building and repairing. In winter, if the weather was very bad, we brought the sheep into the barns, kept them safe and warm, ready for January, when lambing season began. But it was during summer when I really came into my own. Shearing season. Mother and Father carried out the bulk of it, while I made more frequent trips into town. Not with carcasses for meat, but with my cart laden with wool. And in the summer, with even more opportunity to do so, I found myself frequenting the local taverns more and more. You could say I became a familiar sight in the taverns, in fact, in my long buttoned-up waistcoat, knee breeches, white stockings, and the slightly battered brown tricorn that I like to think of as my trademark, because my mother said it went well with my hair, which was permanently in need of a cut, but quite a striking sandy colour if I do say so myself. It was in the taverns I discovered that my gift of the gab was improved after a few ales at noon. The booze, it has that effect, doesn't it?